Hello everyone, my name's Steve Curran, I'm leader of the council, so welcome to our conference this afternoon. There's been a very good turnout, as you heard from Mark, and I think that's indicative of the support we've had from communities, businesses and individuals right across the borough since the pandemic started. It's hard to imagine, it's only 6 months ago that it started, and we're still in the middle of it, and we've had further restrictions imposed on us from today, which I hope everyone's going to adhere to. And we all know of the recent rises in cases, not only in Hounslow, but across London and the rest of the country. So it's really important that we follow the guidance to ensure the safety of not only ourselves and our family, but our wider community. So I would implore everyone to do that. And how difficult that is. I went to Spain a couple of weeks ago, knowing that I was going to face lockdown for 2 weeks. It wasn't too bad. I've been working from home for most of the time anyway, so it was good to get a break. But I know for some people it's possible. Those people who've been at risk, we had over 22,000 people were shielded, who we supported through the pandemic. And that shows you the enormity of the responsibility that we had as a council to our residents and communities. But that wasn't unique to Hounslow. So every borough was doing that, not only in the country. So we're so grateful for the support we've received from communities and individuals. It's been humbling to see what people have done. And it's some of the small things that have been really inspiring to me, and I know to other councillors. Those little gestures of kindness have been really important to individuals and families. I know that many councillors delivered food parcels, etc. I did that across the borough, and it just shows you if you're in a position to help and support people, that people aren't always as well off as you may think, and they were struggling. So I was delighted that the council could help so many residents in the borough. And so I'd like to thank again all of those community groups, all those individuals and all of those businesses that stepped up to the mark to help us provide those support to those 22,000 shielded people. So thank you and well done. I think now would be a good time in the proceedings just to have a moment of reflection, to think about those people we lost. So we lost over 230 people died in the borough, and obviously some people are still recovering from the effects of COVID. So if we just have a moment of reflection, just to think about those people and to say thanks to all those people that helped out. Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to hear from Niall Bolger, the Chief Exec, shortly, but I just wanted to map out what we're doing as a council. You've heard about the council's immediate response to COVID and supporting those 22,000 shielded people. That work is continuing through our community hub, and again, thanks to all the people who supported the community hub. But now we're moving into the recovery phase, and the economic downturn is a real challenge. It will have significant effects on our communities over the weeks and months. With furlough ending at the end of October, we could see and are likely to see a dramatic rise in unemployment in the borough. We've got over 37% of our boroughs been on furlough at some time or the other, and when that comes to an end, it will have a dramatic effect on families. And I think it's easy to fall into the stats of the COVID and how many people have been infected, how many people are going to lose their jobs, and the cost of everything. But in reality, that's lives, that's people's livelihoods. It's affecting their families. It affects everything we do in our community. So I said to someone the other day, this isn't a pebble in the pond, it's a boulder, and we're facing a tsunami. We don't know how high that tsunami is going to go. So the effects on communities, not only in Hounslow, but in other boroughs like Hillingdon and Ealing and the rest of South West London, will be huge, and we need to prepare our residents and our businesses to respond to that. So that's part of the conference today, to understand what those challenges are and how we can work together as a borough, as a community, to support those people who will need our help. And it's a real challenge. So we're working not only in Hounslow to do that, but through the West London Alliance and through the Mayor's office and through central government. So one of I think the challenges around the airline industry is that because the rules are changing all the time around lockdown, etc., and quarantine, it's very hard to judge what's happening. But what we can say is that we could lose over the next 3 years almost £1 billion out of the economy in West London because of that. And there are thousands upon thousands of jobs at risk. So we think we've got a handle on how many jobs are going to go in the short term, but it's that longer term problem we're facing. So we need to work together and find solutions that we can bring to the table, that communities can join with and help us solve those problems. So particularly, I'm concerned about people in those low paid jobs in the airline industry, predominantly from the BOROUGH'S community, certainly in our part of London. And then we've got this cohort of young people that left college or school in the summer, and they've not gone to university. They would be going into apprenticeships and traineeships right across the borough, linked to the airline industry. It's how we support them as well. And then we've got the other group of people, the other cohort, which is the people over 50 find it even more difficult to get a job. How do we retrain them and skill them up? And how do we support those young people coming into the jobs market for the first time? So they're all fighting for a very limited number of jobs. So we need to curate an environment that encourages new startups, encourages tech, but also really important for me is a green economy. I'm not sure what that means yet. We hear a lot about retrofitting buildings and homes, etc. But what else does that mean? What other businesses and organisations can we attract to South West London to take the place of those businesses which will be lost because of the retraction of the airline industry? So it's a lot to ponder. It does keep you awake at night, and I know it does others as well. So it's really important that we work together. I'm going to stop now, if that's okay. Once again, thanks for everyone for joining in. I hope you stay for the rest of the conference, and it's going to be as interactive as we possibly can. And then we're going to have a panel session, including our local MPs and businesses at the end of the conference, and we can hear what their views are about how we face these challenges. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand back to Mark.
Brilliant, thank you, Leader. Before I hand over to the Chief Exec, we've got a short video that just demonstrates the amazingness of Hounslow pulling together during the pandemic. So let me.
At the minute, we're just sorting out some salad. So we've had some donations from Chiswick Gardens of some fresh salad. So we're just sorting through this, bagging it up so it's ready to go out today in our boxes.
When the outbreak of COVID came, we were able to sort of work very quickly with public health and our community nurses to make sure we got in there fast to the care homes.
They've been helping with everything from simple as food to toiletries and helping with sorting out, universal credit.
These packs and some more in there are going to special packages, are going to the most vulnerable that we're working with from Medcamp.
Open Kitchen, which was already for over a year now giving out free food to people with no money, has had to gear up massively to deal with the COVID crisis, and I think they're providing meals for over 300 people every day.
The Friday that we went into lockdown, we made a plan to make sure that our pupils could continue to learn. We handed out about 28,000 meals to pupils from 3 or 4 local schools, but also to local care homes and some sheltered housing.
After lockdown, people asking us queries on various topics such as food banks, accessing health and social care services, childcare.
Very early days, we put closing down hotels in touch with food banks so their perishable food didn't go to waste. Later on, when central government introduced the loans and grants, this then filtered down to local government, and then we put businesses in touch directly with Hounslow Council.
Our partnership with the London Borough of Hounslow has been very much that, a true partnership. We've worked in collaboration with them through all the COVID protocols. We've been delighted to join the Hounslow Recovery Board, and we look forward to working with all the team at the London Borough of Hounslow to really try and improve the lives for everybody post the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I'd like to add my welcomes to that to the leader of the council as well. And I'm going to be speaking for about 15 minutes to talk about the borough, about what happened in the borough during the pandemic, how people are feeling, particularly during this period of time, which has been very unsettling for communities and for organisations right away across our borough. And what the impacts have been in terms of our economy, our communities, and also in relation to what's happened to our residents and their aspirations for the future. Then I'm going to be talking a bit about how we're responding so far, and also where this conference can help us to refine and hone where we go next. So I'll start my presentation now, if I may. There you go. So let's start with the borough itself. You're very familiar with the borough in all its glory, but some key facts for you to give you some information about where we are. We're home to at least 285,000 people and 15,000 businesses. We generate about £14 billion of gross value added, which is a measure of economic performance to the UK economy, which is the 7th highest out of the 33 London boroughs. But also it's one of the highest in the top 20, in fact, in the UK. As you can see, we're home to a vast variety of individuals and people. There are over 285 languages spoken in our primary schools, which gives a good indication of that diversity. And the majority of the population of our borough is Black, Asian and minority ethnic. So in general, people get on really well in our borough, and it's very coherent, very low levels of disharmony amongst the various communities that are represented in our community. And that is good for us in the context of how we responded and how we reacted to the pandemic as this unfolded over the last 7 months. So if we go on to the next slide, you can see the clinical impact of COVID on our communities is quite stark. As you can see, around April, beginning of April, there was the peak in terms of infection. And this is the number of cases, and it's based on a 7-day average. So it looks back 7 days and rolls forward to the current day with an average per day. You can see that there was a slight increase earlier this summer, and now we're seeing a steadier increase. Like everybody else in the England at the moment, there's been an increasing rate of infection apparent in the borough, and the current rate per 100,000 is 29 per 100,000. So we are aware of that, and we're sufficiently concerned that we will be ramping up our response to that, and in line with the government's announcement. And as the leader said, there's further restrictions being announced, which are operational today. So if we go on to the next slide. So our response was immediate, and it was to the critical issues that we were experiencing way back in February and March. We were keeping an eye on the pandemic as it is emerging internationally, and we were waiting for the response from government, but we started the preparatory work for our overall response plan early, and we're able to implement that swiftly. So our top line priority is always to keep the most vulnerable residents as safe as we possibly can. We've wanted to work very collaboratively with our partners, and our staff have been fantastic in terms of the way that they've adapted. Over 1,800 of the council's employees continue to work remotely, but also we've continued with our core frontline operational services. And I'm really delighted and pleased, and thank you very much to all of you on this conference as well, about the reception you've given, for example, to our refuse crews, our highways workers, our social workers. But they've continued to work along with schools employees to make sure the community can continue to function. Looking at how that was expressed, particularly we look at the community hub. We set the community hub up in 7 days, and that supported the most vulnerable residents, 23,000 residents who were shielded, over 42,000 calls were made, 12,000 plus inward contacts, people getting in touch with us, as well as the data we were getting from national government. At the peak of the community hub, we were delivering 800 or more food parcels every week. And in addition to that, 450,000 residents volunteered, and over 80 offers of community support were received from community groups. And that was a massive mobilization of our residents and our communities. And I'd like to say again and again, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was amazing how much that helped, supported us, and it's helped us to rethink what we need to do for the future, and working collaboratively with our residents, the voluntary community sector, and other parts of the public services as well. If you go on to the next slide, Mark. So how are people feeling? We've surveyed residents to find out what the impact has been on their lives. So if we go on to the next slide, we can see that when do residents expect a return to normality? And from this, you can see the peak there, over 32% or more. So 39% in that more less optimistic side of the equation believe that it's going to take more than a year, or it never will. So that's over a third of our population. Almost 40% actually believe that they will never get back to normal, or will take a very long time to get there. As you can see, 2% believe it's less than 1 month, and you can read that yourself. And by the way, these slides will be available to you later as well, so we'll make sure these are distributed. If we go on to the next slide, Mark. So we also asked about support needs, and you can see from the range of issues here that purple is the current issue and green is future issues. By far the biggest requirement for future support is going to be about finances and employment. There's a critical concern also about mental health, and the immediate access to food and supplies, as you can see, is seen to be waning by some, but there's still a significant number of people who believe that they're going to return in the longer term. If you go on to the next slide, this is also quite stark in relation to how people get their support. So as you can see, and again, these will be available to you, 12%, the purple chunk on the left of the screen, pardon me, believe that if they were sick in bed, they'd get a lot of support, but so get no support whatsoever, pardon me. So that's an incredible statistic, that 12% of people believe nobody will be there for them if they were to be really unwell in bed. And if you could look at the right side, we asked people about what they do, whether they would do the same or less since coronavirus outbreak, whether they could do the same or less. Some people said they've done more, but a lot of people, 4%, think they can do less. And that you can see that a fifth of our residents also believe that they could be about the same. So the loneliness indicator is also quite interesting. As you can see, over 10% and 4% of population either say they're always lonely or 10% feel often that they're lonely. So 15% of our residents who were surveyed said that. And incredibly, 32% say some of the time they feel in that way. So if you go on to the next slide. So what has been the impact on the community? And it's important that we've done some independent evaluation, and we've appointed a range of different people to help us with that independent evaluation, including some seminal work from Oxford Economics, who are considered to be one of the best globally to assess economic implications. So let's start with the economic impacts, and these are, it's fair to say, it's not hyperbole to say that these are stark and considerable. You remember that we're home to 15,000 businesses, and we also have a range of different sectors evident in our borough. So far, 8,000 residents have lost their jobs, 6,000 have lost earnings or hours, 55,600 residents are furloughed at risk, which means that at the end of October, there's no guarantee they will return to employment. 12,000 businesses have suffered negative impacts. Remember, there are 15,000 businesses in the borough. 8,000 are suspended operation in lockdown, and over 3,000 businesses are anxious about keeping trading in the medium to long term. So in terms of the gross value added figure that I mentioned earlier on in my presentation, we're projecting that up 2.7 billion pounds will be lost from the gross value added in the Hounslow economy. And our town centres, as you can see, have also been hugely impacted. We have 1,500 plus retail units, and 500 across the 4 town centres are remaining closed. There's been 11% reduction in spending since in comparison to 2020, and there are huge vulnerabilities and fragilities evident in our local economy, particularly in specific sectors. We go on to the next slide. So this is specifically about Heathrow Airport, and Heathrow is a major issue for us in Hounslow. About a quarter of our economy is based on transport and logistics. There's almost been £1 billion lost to Hounslow's economy, or will be lost to Hounslow's economy as a result of the downturn in Heathrow's activity. At the present moment in time, for the latest figures we have, the airport is only operating at 18% of its pre-COVID level. So 82% of its traffic has been reduced. There are up to 43,000 jobs at risk in the borough. 1/3 of the total employment in Hounslow is dependent in one way or another, either in direct employment with the airport or within the supply chain that I've just mentioned. In addition to that, as with the pandemic, this has exposed some really strong issues in relation to social exclusion and differential outcomes for our residents. There's been a disproportionate, or there's projected to be a disproportionate impact on BAME communities, women, the low paid and the low skilled, all of whom tend to be concentrated in parts of the borough. But every single part, every single ward in the borough has been impacted and will be impacted. Go to the next slide, Mark. So this gives the indication of the spread. This is a combination of 2 different indices. The first is ones with a high proportion of businesses impacted, and those with low skills and insecure employment. And as you can see, the concentration of that impact is expected to be in the west of the borough, particularly around the wards and areas surrounding Heathrow Airport. But as you can see, as I mentioned already, no part of the borough is immune from the impacts of COVID-19 and its economic consequences. If you go on. So impact on society, again, some stark numbers for your consideration. I'm going to mention some of these. Again, these slides will be available to you. There's been a 157% increase in people living in temporary accommodation. In terms of known rough sleepers, that's increased by 1,000% over the last 7 months. In relation to the housing register, that's where people apply for council housing, there's been a 71% increase in registrations. Domestic abuse referrals, also a key worry point for us. There's been a 139% increase as compared to this time last year. And domestic abuse contacts in relation to children's social care has also increased by 60% in comparison to the same time last year. You can see the final indicator here, which is a really serious one. There's a 72% increase in calls to refuge. And all of these are indicative of stresses within families and communities, manifested itself in various ways, not least domestic violence and abuse, as well as homelessness. I would like to reassure you our reaction and response to those increases has been solid, resilient, and forthright, but we are expecting some significant implications for the borough as a consequence of the liberation from, for example, evictions that landlords will have towards the latter part of October. So go on to the next slide. So what have we done to it about it? We didn't sit back, we didn't wait for this just to land on our lap. What we decided to do quite early on is to establish a recovery program. And that recovery program consists of 4 task forces. And across all 3 or 4 of those task forces, we're crucially considering issues related to deprivation, inequalities and impacts on particular communities, and social capital. What's meant by that? How resilient are we as communities? How the VCS are working with us? How we work across borders and boundaries within our services to make things better. Underpinning this is definitely about collaborating with our partners and making sure that we make joint decisions together going forward. And this conference is the, if you will, the final stage in sharing with you our initial thoughts before we make recommendations to our cabinet going forward in October and onwards in terms of other agencies so that they can take these actions forward. Thank you, Mark. So our proposed community recovery looks and builds on the community hub experience. It's looking at mental health support, financial advice, and a core offer about how we integrate all of these activities physically and digitally so that residents can get easy information and access to the information to help them and support them to be independent. We want to reconfigure the way that we deliver our grant program, looking at ways in which we can wrap around people working in a different way with the voluntary and community support services within the VCS sector. And crucially, really mobilising voluntary effort, which was evident during the pandemic, and helping and supporting residents to do more of that and to facilitate further development of voluntarism within the borough. The second proposal is about economic recovery and regeneration. And as you can see, this is key. This is at the core of our recovery programme. First is about access to employment and skills. Really focusing rapidly, and I'm really pleased that we're making good progress on this with our colleagues in DWP and other parts of the public services, so it's as easy as possible for residents to get the support they need. Business regrowth, helping businesses to regrow, really working with our colleagues in the Chambers of Commerce, West London Business and the business community to really drive that regrowth agenda. The issue about place shaping is going to be incredibly important. What do we do with town centres that are struggling? How do we make sure we solidify some of the positive gains from COVID? There was a 90% reduction in nitrogen dioxide oxide emissions, pardon me, during the peak of the pandemic. What does that mean for the way that the borough functions and works? Really accelerating our housing growth and development. You can see from the data I just provided to you about homelessness and issues related to vulnerable tenancies. We really do need to redouble our efforts in relation to housing growth and development, and attracting investment for recovery is going to be key. Underpinning all of this is genuinely engaging early, often and regularly with the communities we serve, and making sure we deliver a green recovery. Really capitalize on the environmental gains and the reshaping of our economy, which is possible as we reimagine our future. On the next one, Mark. The social well-being piece, as you can see, is also critical. So around our children and young people, our immediate priorities has been about expanding our mental health offer, and that's in place. And great thanks to our colleagues in the NHS, locally and regionally for that. We've returned children relatively successfully to school, and we hope to keep them there so that they can feel safe, and their parents and carers believe that they are safe. And along with that, moving on, we're also preparing our work on winter planning. We know that there's going to be, if there's a tough winter, that has adverse implications for our residents. And really looking at ways in which we can tackle some of these key issues in health, such as diabetes related to obesity. One of the key facts around our borough is we've got one of the highest rates of adult and childhood obesity in the country. And we know from COVID-19, that's a key indicator for poor outcomes through infection. We've got to collectively take on, that's our moonshot, take on the challenge of obesity and its prevalence within our communities. And along with that, there will be a major campaign for flu and inoculation. Along with well-being, expanding our health and well-being offer, speeding up our integration work with the NHS, really making sure that we have preventative and early intervention services is key. And it's something which we really want to hear from you about how we can make that as effective as we possibly can. Mark. On the green recovery, we have decided that across the piece, which has been really enlightening, in fact inspiring to listen to the multi-agency partnership that's brought forward these ideas. A lot of these individuals are on this call today as well. We're looking at low carbon neighbourhoods and looking at flagship projects around creating 15-minute neighbourhoods and looking at a low carbon demonstrator in our borough. We're also looking at a green enterprise zone and innovation district. So the airport may well have reduced its activity. What's the potential for us to look at green aviation and the associated industries? What can we do about capturing the opportunities about the green employment sector? Across London, there's an estimate that that's valued at 450 million per annum, and estimated to increase by the end of the decade to be a business sector worth 3 billion. How can we capitalize on that for Hounslow? Green growth, looking at green skills related to that green employment and enterprise zone. What are the skills we need to really capture this new industry, these new economic opportunities, and how do we ensure we invest in people for the future? And along with that, we need to have a look at our work around the 21st century mobility. How do we get people from A to B? There are now 212 participants on this conference. That wouldn't be even feasible in my mind a matter of 4 months ago. People wouldn't have thought that we could do this. What does that mean for mobility? What does it mean for green technologies? All of these things we'd really like to hear from you as well. Mark. So today is all about our borough's recovery, about what the future impacts are, what it means for health and well-being, how we tackle the injustices of inequality, which has become really evident through this process, how that varies across our borough, and where there's good variance and not so good variance, where there's poorer outcomes just because where you live versus other outcomes that may be positive because it's about your community and your neighbourhoods. We're talking about the precariousness of work. Certainly during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of our adults and younger people in particular have been affected by the precariousness of their employment. And certainly businesses have been demonstrated to be not as resilient as they maybe need to be. What can we do about that? One of the positives, I think, personally, and hearing a lot of those humbling stories from across the borough, has been about the community capacity. We have a vibrant, resilient, caring community from all sorts of backgrounds who want to help each other in our borough. Really capitalising on that and really investing in our community capacity will be incredibly important for our future borough. And finally, what do we want from local renewal? Because despite all of that data that I presented and all of that information you've received in quite a lot concentrated hit in this way, like everything, this will pass. But what does it mean for our renewal? What do we capture from this dreadful experience that we can take something forward and make something positive for the future? Thank you very much for listening. I'm really looking forward to the workshops in a moment. So I'm just going to pass on now. There are a few people who are going to be talking to us about their own experience. So the first person is Dr. Talak Mahmood, and he's going to be talking to us for about 5 minutes about his own experience recently.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experience. You can take that slide off if you like, and then we can all see each other a little bit. I suppose from my perspective, it's been an incredibly difficult time, and we're stuck between sort of small victories and then the challenge of the future and not knowing what that holds, and it has been quite difficult. It's been difficult on a personal level, and it's just that I suppose it's like having a baby. So you can put up with 1 or 2 nights of sleepless nights, but when it carries on, then it becomes quite difficult. But it becomes cumulative, and it takes its toll. So I just want to give a shout out to all of our staff who've gone above and beyond what their roles and duties are, and everyone's actually gone that extra mile, and that is something that actually has been recognised by other people in this room as well. And also the patients have been amazing. They've been incredibly understanding and kind, and actually we, sometimes reluctant to ask for help when it is there and it's available. So I suppose the key thing I want to get across is the fact that we've learned is that we just need to make sure, take some time out, and things like this are amazing because they give you that chance to reflect and understand the fact that we kind of need to look after ourselves, and you need to have a little bit of a rest. Otherwise, I think the airlines say you've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on for your children. So I think that's something just to kind of think about, and we're starting to do mentoring and coaching for the staff so that everybody helps support each other using a coaching model. And we've done a similar thing actually with patients too. So lots of things now we're contacting patients proactively rather than waiting for them to kind of contact us. So I work in a practice, it's called HOUNSLOW'S, and we are in near Asda in Hounslow. We've got about 13,000 patients, and we've got about 30 staff. The 3 things that we stand for are wellness, so making sure that we focus on things for like diet and exercise, trying to personalize the care that we provide for patients, and social responsibility. So looking at reducing our carbon footprint, so we have an aim of getting to a carbon footprint of 0 in the next few years, but also having a closer link with schools and colleges. I think one of the things that has been mentioned a few times today is the fact that there needs to be better links between employment, healthcare, and education. So I think that's something that we're really keen to kind of get involved in. I suppose from our practice perspective, on 20th of March, we went remote working. And then we've 30th of March, that was the emergency things that happened. And then the 30th of March, we did a survey where we had 2,000, this is the information gathering piece that the council kind of carried out. We did something similar ourselves, but we had a survey and 2,000 of our patients responded, sharing their concerns and what they could do and what they were worried about. And then we looked at how we could support patients, and we've done a variety of things, which includes things like gardening and just physical, mental health and well-being. And interestingly, after this conference today, I have another one at 6 o'clock where we have 550 people attending a get-together, sort of discussing how gardening can help support physical and mental wellness. And on the 15th of May, I noticed in the news at the moment about practices and healthcare being open, but on the 15th of May, we noticed that actually there was a reduction in demand. So we put together a video and sent out messages to patients just saying, look, we are open, and it may not be exactly the way it was before, but we definitely are here and we're here for you. And if you need us, just contact us. The sector briefly has been through quite a difficult time. It's back to this uncertainty, and I think there are lots of positive things now. I think we are working increasingly together, and I think if we could work, integrated care is always something that has been a little bit elusive, I think, where different healthcare and social care organisations work together. There are some areas where it's worked really well, but actually I think there's been plenty of evidence of that working, being much more productive recently. And I suppose we need to brace ourselves for potential second waves, but as we mentioned, we are planning for that and the flu season. So I kind of think it's been difficult, but I think we're okay-ish. We should be okay, depending on how things pan out. But I think just being around other people who are able to help and support is probably all we can do to try to deal with the future, which is a little bit uncertain for us all.
Thank you. Thanks, Tal. And I'm going to ask now Ray Singh, who's a managing director of Russell Finex, which is a firm based in Feltham. Are you up with us, Ray?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks very much for asking me to say a few words. Just for those of you that don't know us, we're a medium-sized company, as Mark says, based in Feltham. We're a machinery manufacturer, which supplies products to production lines in a wide range of industries, such as food manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, confectionery, paint, etc., etc. In our business, we have both office-based staff and a factory to run as well. And with the kind of situation that we've been through, obviously our factory personnel, they can't work from home because they need to actually be in the factory to do the kind of engineering work and the manufacturing of products, etc. But what we have done is we set up our office staff to be able to work from home. We could kind of see where things were heading because of all the stuff on the news with things going on in countries like Spain, etc., etc. We've got a company in Belgium, and as it happened, I was over there on the day when they locked down, about 10 days before we did. That one an evening when I was there, they announced that from the following day they were locking down. So I could kind of see what was coming. We weren't really, as a company, geared up to be able to allow a lot of our people to work from home. So what we did was we, seeing the warning signs, we set ourselves up the following week. And fortunately, by a lot of hard work by a lot of our people, we managed to get ourselves in a position that on the Friday before lockdown came, we were kind of in a position to be able to get most of our office staff to work from home. We had our few glitches, as you could imagine, in this kind of situation, but by and large, we kind of managed to get things moving. We've had our share of people who have had to shield themselves because of underlying health problems, and equally also people who have had to shield other members of their family as well. So we've kind of worked around that to try and give people the assistance and support and help that we can, while still trying to carry on and operate as a business. What I'd have to say, and this is, and I'm not wanting to be political here, but what I'd say is the guidance we found from the government wasn't very clear. If anything, it appeared to be designed to confuse, and I don't know if that was deliberate, so that nobody could actually point fingers at the end of the day, or whether that was just how it was. I don't really know. And so, as I said, they didn't really make things very clear in terms of when lockdown came as to which kind of businesses should carry on working or which kind of businesses they was kind of suggesting needed to close. And what we found was, I mean, it was critical for us to stay open. As I mentioned, we serve a lot of these industries, which are key industries, such as the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and we even have got equipment operating at one of the companies which was given the contract for making the ventilator parts as well. And what we had many of these large corporations contacting us and saying, look, we want you to stay open. Can you stay open? Make sure that you can service us so that we keep going, because we don't want our equipment to break down. When that kind of started happening, because we weren't very clear of where we stood, I sought help from our local MP, Seema Malhotra, and her office. They made some inquiries on my behalf to BEIS, and eventually we got a letter from them, which at best I would say was woolly and actually didn't tell us a great deal. So we were kind of left to get on with it. At the same time, I'd approached the Hounslow Chamber of Commerce as well, and they then put me in touch with the Director of Public Health at Hounslow Council, and this helped us because we explained what we did, etc., and they then said that they felt that we were, if you like, one of the companies that operated in kind of a key area.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Can I ask Alex and Munir from the Rihanna project for your 5 minutes as well, please? Are you there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex. Yeah,
hi, Alex.
Yeah, all right. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak at a conference. A bit about myself, I guess. I'm the editor-in-chief of Voices of Rihanna, which is an anthology project that is dedicated to providing a platform for youngsters like myself to speak out about how COVID has affected us and to talk about like the bitter and sweet memories that we've experienced during the lockdown. And so I've been asked to talk a bit about the purpose of the anthology and my vision for it. So here's my attempt, all right? There's a famous metaphysical thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. And that's what it says is that suppose one day a ship sets off from a harbor, it's equipped with everything needed to replace each component on the ship. And during the journey through perilous storms, the ship cracks and wears over time. And by the time the ship returns home and docks at the harbor again, every component has been replaced. So is the ship still the same thing? In this case, the storms are the pandemic and the ship is the society. After the pandemic, the society will be different. Many employers such as Facebook have already shifted employees to fully remote positions. For example, personally, well, my A-levels potentially be cancelled. I wonder whether online lectures are still going to be the same as classroom learning, right? So in that light, I wonder whether society is still the same. One interpretation of the ship of thesis is that it's the structure that defines the ship. What I mean is that on a macroscopic level, society still functions a very similar way because we still have the same fundamental elements, the government, the economy, and the people. But from a microscopic level, however, we've all undergone different changes. Everyone's been affected by the pandemic differently.
So I'm Munir. I wrote a poem for the Rihanna project, and I was asked to give a short talk on this conference today. And I think the biggest thing I want to talk about is COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 has had so many effects on us, but the biggest thing that we've all had for the last 6 months is time to reflect. We've been able to reflect on how important healthcare workers are to us, teachers. And the biggest thing that I want to talk about is how important what we've taken away on the human experience and what informs the human experience. And I think prior to COVID-19, I think what was informing most of our experiences was your 9-to-5 job, your school, your regular routines, and going through the motions constantly without really taking time to step back and realize, what am I doing? What is important about what I'm doing? And so I really want to ask everyone here in the conference today, what is it that's informed your experience in the last 6 months and what you've taken away from it, whether that's the importance of family, your friends, love or compassion. And I think that those experiences inform us as humans more than the 9-to-5 that we have or the school that we go to or the grades that we get.
Thank you very much, Munir, and thank you so much to you and Alex for taking the time out to give that perspective as well. Mark, I'm going to hand back to you to take us through the workshops. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening so far.
We've got these 8 themes. I'm not going to read them out. You've been allocated to a workshop based on your preference when you registered for the conference. We've had to balance out the numbers as well a little bit. So you may not have got your first choice, but I think all the workshop titles there are going to be really interesting and informative. So we'll ask you all to be respectful of your colleagues in the room, to engage. There'll be smaller groups, so there will be opportunity to talk more and for it to be more two-way, certainly.
Obviously, it's good to catch up with people today and bring together all the work that I've been aware of by having smaller meetings over the last 6 months. And I want to just echo Niall's and Steve's thanks to all of those people who have kept the show on the road in Hounslow for people for whose lives have been, for many people, really upturned. I mean, it's really good that we're talking about Hounslow solutions while nationally we're talking about solutions. It's been a very difficult 6 months. Obviously, the COVID pandemic could not have been planned for fully, but there have been concerns about U-turns. So it is difficult for both those reasons to plan solutions properly, but doing things together on a local basis I think is really important. I hope today has helped to get more people in touch with each other on solutions. I'm particularly grateful to Niall and Mandy Skinner and to Steve for keeping me in touch with and also asking for my help in Parliament, and Seema as well has been on those calls, asking for our help in Parliament to raise issues as we see them emerging in Hounslow, and also to the team at West Middlesex, Chell West Hospital, many voluntary sector groups, the Mental Health Trust, CCG and so on. So, and Tracy as well at West Thames. But so thank you to everyone who's kept Seema and I in touch with what's happening. Please continue to raise, this goes for everybody on this conference. Please continue to use us as your MPs to raise issues and concerns in Parliament, or let us know what's going on, because also we both have quite large social media following. So if you want something to announce to the world, please copy us in as well to your media links. And thank you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Going to crack on. So John Barney, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Steve. Just to reiterate what Ruth said, thank you to everybody for pulling this together. It's been invaluable. Sadly, we didn't really have a lot of time to get into the interactive discussion section within our workshop, but just from our perspective, I think when Councillor Curran asked us to join the Hounslow Recovery Board, there was absolutely no hesitation from our perspective, because we are a football club that is at the heart of the community, and the community means so much to us. We see our role really as trying to amplify the messages that we all collectively come together with in terms of sending out to the wider community. And we have an unbelievable vehicle to do that, really, through the Brentford Community Sports Trust, who have been working tirelessly through the lockdown with their Be at Home to campaigns and Be Well campaigns, and I know they've run lots of online and virtual sessions across a whole broad topic base. But look, I think everything that everyone said today shows a real willingness for people to pull together and to try and make lives better for everyone in our community.
Okay. Thanks very much, John. Could I ask Lily Bath, Councillor Lily Bath, to say a few words?
I think in terms of some of the sort of things that have come out today, really, and I think it's, from my perspective, it's been quite interesting because it's made me realise how fragile we all are, not just as a society, but just in terms of our emotional well-being, our economy, our job, our health, everything. And I think COVID has really kind of exacerbated some of the issues that have already existed in society. And I think we really had to refocus on that. And I think that's something that has come across quite strongly. I mean, in terms of my portfolio in housing, I mean, having a housing brief means that you're constantly coming across people who are becoming homeless or people in housing need. And that's always been a big issue, irrespective of COVID. But what we've seen now is, of that need being exacerbated. So I think for me, it's really about understanding that and really knowing what we are going to do with that and how we prepare for the future, because it's about how do we manage that, because we know we are very fragile in many, many, many ways. What are we going to do about it, and how are we going to move forward with that? And I think that is some of the themes that have come out really from today for me.
Thanks very much, Lee. So I'm going to ask Becky Coffin from Heathrow Airport.
So I'm the Director of Communities at Heathrow Airport and have been working with my team, with Steve, Niall and others on this important work. I've just come from the Digital Communities workshop, which was a fantastic discussion with a really wide range of different participants. And I was really impressed by two things. Firstly, the understanding that you at Hounslow already have of who really needs help in this space, and there was some very quite stark statistics shared about where some of the pockets of lack of connectivity are, and that really brought home how important it is that we think about those groups and how we can reach them in different ways. And I think it brought into stark focus for me how we need to communicate and collaborate in ways we never thought of before. You know, the world is so different, there has been so much change, and we mustn't forget that some people get left behind in that. So I think it was very encouraging to see the really good examples. There was a project that your team talked about, Steve, that outlined some of the great things already going on, and there were some new connections that were made. So I think it highlighted perhaps one of the challenges, but showed that there are solutions, and this is really an ideal way to make some of those new connections that will be absolutely critical in the coming months.
Thanks very much, Becky. That's really good. I'm going to ask Seema to come in now. I know Seema just come back, or is at the house, or came back from a meeting on questions around the DWP. So having an up-to-date brief on that would be helpful if it's connected, and I'm sure it is, but just your overall understanding of what's going on in the borough for your residents particularly, and the work with Heathrow, etc., would be helpful. Thanks, Seema.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I hope people can hear me. I do just want to say a thank you to you, to all the teams at the council, and to NHS teams, our schools, community organisations, and Heathrow and other businesses, because I do think it has been an exceptional story in Hounslow's history over the last 6 months. I think every local community will have its own story to tell, but the effort that has gone in, that I think we've seen, I think everybody working incredibly hard during that period. My team, I know, were working 7 days a week, effectively, with all the stresses that the local community came under. I think it was exceptional for us, and also to see a lot of our different community groups come together. I think one of the learnings has been that the sort of national Good Sam and local volunteering networks are going to be incredibly important to sustain for our economic recovery. And I know that this conference and the work that's gone on with the recovery board will be just the sort of start, but there's a long haul in terms of the delivery that's going to be really important to sustain and build perhaps some new institutions and networks to help do that. So in the breakout that I was in briefly, I was very struck by Neil Impiazzi's suggestion of a stronger and more sustained business forum for the borough, which could help very much facilitate with job opportunities, with successful programs like Kickstart, which I do believe that employer engagement and how we can work with the Job Centre on really effective delivery will make a very, very big difference to levering in the resources that are coming available nationally. The three key things, I think, are continuing to work around the prevention of loss of jobs, and that's why in Parliament we are continuing to push for extension of furlough, at least in a targeted way, for industries that are likely to be harder hit, and aviation is definitely one of those sectors. I think secondly, the creation of new jobs, and I think that's quite a specific space in which new investment partnerships, how we accelerate green growth, because some capital investment has really been slowed down over the last 6 months, but how do we collectively look to the creation of jobs, and also where entrepreneurship is a very good and accessible story as part of that. And the third thing is about the access to jobs and employability. Incredibly important. Some of my the conversations I've had with the Job Centre and with the CAB in the last week and a half has been quite stark. You've had some numbers, I know, but we've got 1,700 young people in Hounslow on universal credit, and that's just the under 25s. And this is not going to be a normal year for them, and nor is next year. So keeping young people also engaged is very, very important for that, and how we increase opportunities for employability, including through I think some growing some mentoring programs, and some of that on an ad hoc basis for people who might want to find out about professions, just be able to talk to somebody because they may not have the networks themselves. But secondly, I think as well, the opportunity to think about sector-based work academies. Heathrow has been our strongest example, and I do pay tribute to Heathrow and the Heathrow area businesses for their work there. But I think with the funding that's also becoming available, we should be thinking, how can we increase that opportunity for links, particularly with the NHS, but also with our creative and tech sectors, and do that in a structured way that can see employability opportunities. So I'd very much like to see that is part of how we work with the Job Centre on opportunities. We've been advocating since the council put out its press release last Thursday for the Aviation Communities Fund to support around skills and also infrastructure. So any work that we can do to help with the council and other communities, and continue to work in Parliament ahead of the government's future announcements, I think will be a really good story for how we're working together and extending that insight to other aviation communities. But finally, a couple of other points I would want to mention. We've seen a real financial hardship for families, and how we can look to work alongside advice organisations for strategies for financial inclusion. The CAB have dealt with 7,000 queries over the last 6 months. They wouldn't normally expect to do more than 8,000 in a year. And it's staggering, really, and the debt being a big part of that. So difficulty paying one bill, then the next week it's the council tax, the week after that it's the water bill, then you're borrowing money to pay one bill. And I think for our families, what we don't want to see is a cycle of debt. So any way in which we can work together through the voluntary sector, the council, and any advocacy in Parliament as well, I think will be very important to stem the tide of those who see that debt accelerating and then see themselves at risk of losing their homes, because that's where we could be in 6 months' time. So I think that finally I'd say that just working out together how we want to create resilience in employment as well, because what the national data is also showing is that we're seeing a record rise in 0 hours contracts and a drop in people on payroll. And that's an unsustainable trend. So I think working with employers on how do we work towards opportunities for people to be back on payroll, as well as how do we increase resilience and opportunity, and learn from some very good work going on in think tanks and others, Fabian's and the RSA, the Institute for Employment Studies, on what are the new models that can also be used in a COVID-friendly world. Going to be thinking much more about how the workplace is going to be different in the future, and how we keep linking people up to skills and employment to help achieve that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seema. That's very insightful. Mark, how much time have we got left?
We're due to finish at about 5 o'clock.
Oh, plenty of time then. Right, we've got time for some questions that have come up in the chat, and it's very interesting one I've seen. I think it's from Gerard. Is there a tension between greener targets and sustaining Heathrow? I don't believe there is. There's an opportunity, not a tension. But I'd ask, I think, Becky first to respond to that, and then if any other panelists would like to as well, join in that. So Becky, you go first.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the question. And yeah, this is an issue that came up in roundtables where we talked to many of those here today and others from around the other boundaries of the airport about what should the recovery of Heathrow and the communities connected to it look like. And yeah, we absolutely agree. You know, this can only be a green recovery. We have not forgotten the climate emergency. Yes, there's a health emergency as well, but the climate emergency remains a long-term priority. And we set out earlier this year our target net zero plan to get Heathrow to zero emissions, and that connects with a wider UK plan that was also published earlier this year to do the same thing for the UK aviation industry. So yes, I think we absolutely agree that that is remains a key focus. I think what we have to accept is some of the timelines for delivering some of that might be slightly different, given some of the changes and the challenges that COVID has presented, but our target and destination absolutely does not change. I think just picking up on a couple of the points in the chat about air pollution, I think the other point that we need to remember here is that we don't want a car-led recovery either. So, because you're absolutely right that when you're thinking about local air quality emissions, the key source there is actually cars on the road. It's not the aircraft themselves. So it's a slightly different issue to climate change more holistically. So yeah, I think we're also focused on active travel and working particularly with Hounslow and others on what are the opportunities to take this moment when people are thinking differently about how they travel to change some of that behaviour. And then final point for me, just to pick up on Steve, I would agree with you as well that there's actually opportunity here. You know, the challenge of getting aviation to net zero presents many opportunities for new technologies, in particular how we switch to sustainable aviation fuels in the shorter term, and obviously different sorts of aircraft such as electric in the longer term. And we want to see that kind of green innovation happening around the airport, and it provides a great opportunity for green reskilling and new kinds of roles. So in every challenge there is an opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks. I've got John there. You got a view about that question? Is there between the green economy that we're promoting and Heathrow, is there a tension between both of those goals? If we want the Heathrow aviation industry to recover, but how does that match up with our challenges around the green economy and zero carbon?
I think Becky's definitely a better place to comment on that one than me running a football club. But look, clearly Heathrow Airport, you know, is a significant employer of people in the London Borough of Hounslow, of many of which are our fans. So, you know, they've coexisted for many years historically, and hopefully many years to come. So, you know, as long as everybody's agendas are respected, I think that's that's the way that we need to move forward.
Okay, thanks, John. And I'm sure your new stadium is almost carbon neutral, isn't it?
Indeed, Steve.
Okay, I've got Lily. Do you want to come in on that question? Is there a tension between greener targets and sustaining Heathrow? No. Perhaps it's a daunting question. Ruth. So Barbara, I'm only talking to panelists, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying for many years, since before Terminal 5, that the surface access into Heathrow is far too road vehicle dominated, and we have to continue to fight for those additional rail links, which I think, I mean, in Hounslow, Steve, you've been showing how a southern rail link into Heathrow, partly through part of the borough, would actually be in the long run cost neutral because of the local development benefits. And certainly many authorities have been working together on the western rail link. So that's one way to improve transport access into Heathrow. I suspect that I don't think the growth trajectory of flying will ever go back to how it was, but there's no doubt that where Heathrow is at the moment in terms of daily flights is far below where it should be, and you know, we have to. Now, I would like to see some of the recovery for aviation being built on some conditions around, say, phasing out the older, more polluting aircraft and transport access into our airport. Yeah.
Okay, Seema, would you like to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think this is a really important debate and question. My view is that it's a really great opportunity, and I think a time to step in and step up and step forward. My worry has been a sort of slowdown in not investing in change for the future. Ruth was absolutely spot on with the need to think about new rail links in, and the southern rail access to Heathrow via Feltham and Bedford would actually be transformative in what it would bring, and not just for local residents, but also for, you know, that regeneration, and even for workers to be able to get to Heathrow very quickly. I think as well that we should see this as an opportunity, because Heathrow is it's not just Heathrow itself, but all the businesses, all the supply chain, catering, you know, baggage handling. There are many businesses in the local environment, and there was pockets of change that's been almost going on unnoticed. I think it's time in some senses to, you know, for Heathrow to be able to champion what it does and what its goals are beyond net zero, you know, for the future, and even to set a way in which aviation recovers around the world. And, you know, it would be great if we could see that in a way that could bring investment and actually be helping to create the new green jobs for the future, and be done very much in partnership with local schools and education, FE, Feltham Skills Centre, because that's the kind of sustainable skills base that we'll see Heathrow through the next generation of change and growth.
Okay, thanks very much, Seema. So I think there's a shared agreement that the green agenda is as important as it was before COVID, if not more now, and certainly the recovery has to be green-based and focused. And I'm pleased to hear that Heathrow is still carrying on with its green agenda as well. So that's really important. So we are going all in the right direction. Maybe not exactly at the same point in time, but nearly there. We've got a question from Barbara, and I was going to ask Mandy Skinner, are you on the call? But you might be best placed to answer this. Mandy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Councillor Corrin.
Thank you, man. Do you want to say who you are? So Barbara's asking, this kind of event is very useful. Thank you for that, Barbara. But are residents involved in? Yeah, well, I've just done. If I open the door to you, Barbara, they'll all come rushing in. So I'm not doing that. So how are residents going to be involved in the recovery through your, particularly through your group? Mandy, thank you.
So we haven't had individual residents as part of our recovery board to date, but a lot of the work has involved reaching out to residents and to groups, and we've got a lot of residents on the conference today. Moving forward, once we've sort of gathered up all the contributions that we've had today, we'll be doing a couple of things really. Taking those ideas forward into our recovery plan and our associated suite of interventions and programs, and they will require involvement and engagement with our residents. So please rest assured that we will be reaching out and making sure that people are involved. One of the works from the Community Recovery Task Force and Board has been to look at how the council and our partners engage more generally with residents. And one of the things we want to do over the next sort of couple of months is really reinvigorate that relationship and that dialogue, make it much more two-way, much more porous. So making sure that people can be involved how and when they want to. Obviously, a lot of what we do currently is through digital. But also making sure, and I've seen in the chat as well, that we're reaching out to people who don't normally have a say, who don't normally get involved, and particularly young people. So we want to hear from people about how they want to get involved. So do watch this space, and we'll be making sure that we design lots of different ways that people can have their say on the proposals.
Okay, so I think from the chat, there's Mike Foster's coming with similar comments about ensuring that the residents are involved and those ones working, who are lucky enough to work in, can contribute to the running of these sessions. That certainly we can pick up on, Mike. Joanna Bidoff. Yeah, sorry. So I don't know if anyone wants to, Ruth or, sorry, from Heathrow wants to pick up, Becky, on about developments at Heathrow and some good measures to protect the environment. Is there anything you're particularly doing there that people might be interested to know about from the green perspective? Because green's coming up a lot in the discussions.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Steve. And yeah, we are well aware it's a priority on many people's minds, and including our own. So I think just to pick up a couple of examples. So firstly, around climate change, which I think, you know, from a UK perspective remains the critical challenge. So our focus is on how can we improve how can we improve carbon emissions related to flight at the same time as reducing the emissions related to the airport infrastructure itself. And on the latter, I think we've made really good progress. So right at the beginning of this year, we were able to announce that the infrastructure at the airport is carbon neutral, but we're not going to stop there. So I think when you look at where the emissions from flights are beginning to reduce, there's a couple of key things we need to do. I mentioned earlier sustainable aviation fuels. What needs to happen there is investment in the UK so that we can produce the sustainable aviation fuels that can be put into the aircraft. The issue is one of lack of supply at the moment. And there's a real opportunity here for the UK at this point, I think, to invest in the facilities needed to create that fuel in the UK rather than importing it from elsewhere. And it's really important that we do that in the right way. And it's using, for example, waste, recycled household waste and other waste products rather than new biofuels, for example. So that's a really an opportunity that we've been looking at and partnering with airlines and fuel companies to see how we can make that reality. And then just one second example, if I may, which is more local. So at the same time, we know that air quality is also an important issue for many, and we've recently invested in some new air quality monitoring so that we can really understand what are the sources of emissions locally and what can be done to address them. So there's a whole host of pieces of work that are going on different areas, and be more than happy to follow up with anyone who's particularly interested in that issue offline. I think there was particular mention about some of the proposals that were included in the consultation for expansion. And the point I would just add there is that obviously the expansion of the airport would have meant a lot of change. And that change offers a real opportunity to do things differently, from the design of buildings with green materials to concepts like a green loop that would connect up infrastructure around the airport and allow kind of active travel to be really embedded into some of the local green spaces around the airport. And of course, we will absolutely continue to look at which of those initiatives could still be taken forward. Clearly, we're in a pause at the moment, but we will continue to look at what can be done locally to make the best of all of that work that was put into thinking of those plans. So thank you for the comment.
Okay, thanks. Stephen, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. I think that this is a conversation to keep continuing about both climate change and the local environment and what we choose to change now with this opportunity. I mean, I think even things like the green electric engines for aircraft. So you've got takeoff and landing being much quieter and less polluting as well. I mean, there are some innovations and how we can look at a new generation aircraft to be, to be part of what we want to see from Heathrow and leading the way. But I do just want to make a couple of other points that have come up in the chat. Firstly, the point about sort of Thames Bank Credit Union and the idea that we might be able to, the idea that we could have a sort of stronger financial inclusion strategy involving a lot of our community groups who often will be the front face of people in need, going to them as friends and neighbours. And that would be very important. Secondly, I think involving some of the hyper-local organisations. I think some really good work that's gone on, but sustaining those, because Heston, for example, has had a Heston Cranford group that's evolved from doing the food bank to now thinking about economics, recovery and resilience. The Feltham Laureus Network and the Feltham communities, along with the sort of Bedfont, Feltham Handworth, has been quite important. So lots of groups and looking to how we can be part of some common projects could be very helpful. I think as well we should really be challenging to employers on poverty pay, because I know some employers have cut the London living wage increases that we were looking to see. And I think alongside how difficult it's going to be for local families, making sure we keep some of those commitments is really, really important. And finally, I'll just say about digital inclusion. We saw this with the schools, how much the schools really try to do, and to some extent home access to schoolwork is going to be with us for the next period. So how we can think about the digital divide through in education and employment and do that sort of collectively could also be very helpful, and to have some of our larger technology-based employers perhaps being a bigger part of that picture.
Okay. We don't have to go on till 5 o'clock, so we've had a busy day already, and it's quite challenging doing this on Zoom. Well, I find it so anyway. But I just suppose wanted to finish really. We are going to play the video at the end, and I know there was some comments on the chat that you couldn't hear it. I didn't like the music anyway, and I did tell Ben Knowles about that this morning, but it was too late. I should have listened to it earlier. But I'm sure we'll improve the music at some point, but we'll make sure that the video is sent out with the information from here so you can look at it at your leisure. We are going to play it at the end to sign us off, but if the sound breaks up again, apologies for that. Just wait and we'll send it out with further information from here. So really it's time just to thank everyone really. So everyone, I think, Mark, we're over 200 people on the call at some point during the day or the afternoon.
Yep, that's correct. Yep, fantastic.
and we've got a really wide range of views from people right across Hounslow, and that's really important. That's from community, business, the airport, all everything that we thought we knew about. We're finding more details out, so that needs to continue. It has been really interesting, but we have to put some reality in here. The times ahead are going to be even more difficult and challenging. So I know we all have our views about Heathrow, but what we should all share, the same view, is that we need to protect as many jobs as possible, because that will impact on families. It's not just about the statistics that you've heard today. Those statistics turn into individuals and families. So those people facing the winter with unemployment, still the cloud of COVID hanging over us with the new lockdown measures brought in today, and with a possibility of further increases in infections over the winter months. On top of that, if we have a bad winter, that's another pressure on the health service and social services. On top of that, if you dare say it, we've got Brexit to deal with in the new year, and we hope that we will have an agreement and we won't leave without a deal. So if you overlay all of these things, all of the residents and businesses have got enormous challenges over the next weeks and months. So I think it's up to all of us, and I know if you're on this call, you are engaged with that fight to protect jobs, protect their livelihoods, and protect communities over the next weeks and months. So irrespective of our political views, we all share that one goal, I think, which is to protect as many people as possible from the effects of COVID and unemployment. So there's still an enormous amount to do. And I think just touching again on the aviation industry, it's not just Hounslow that's affected, and in West London and the other West London boroughs, but if you're in Crawley, you've got Gatwick. If you're in Southampton, you've got an airport there. Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, Southend, the list goes on and on. So we do need, and I'm really grateful for Ruth and Seema to take up the challenge for us in Parliament to try and get the government to have a strategic response to the collapse of the airline industry and the effect that has on our community. So we do need government to intervene, as they have done with other industries, and they should be doing it for the aviation industry. It's not just about London, and it is about the rest of the country as well, because we're all interdependent on the airline industry. So I would ask Ruth and Seema to carry on the good work there and keep banging the drum on behalf of Hounslow and Heathrow to ensure that we can protect as many jobs as possible.